Hey everyone, my name is Joe Smith and I want to welcome you to Mosaic. We're so glad you joined us for church today. I'm just so excited for what we're going to be a part of and experience together as we dive into the scriptures. See, this summer, it's really been an incredible time for me and my family. My wife Rebecca and our 3 kids, Isaiah who's 5, Indigo who's 3, and River who's 9 months old. It's just been an incredible time where we've spent more time together this summer than we ever have in our entire lives. And one of the highlights for us has been every year we'll take a family vacation to Palm Springs, and Rebecca's dad has a timeshare, and so he so generously has gifted us and allowed us to go and take the kids and have a great time. And this summer, it was a special one because Isaiah is about to start kindergarten, and in order to go to his school, he has to learn how to swim. And he's been really nervous, and we've taken a few swim classes, and we're trying to get him comfortable with the pool. And so we thought this is a great opportunity, right? 4 days in Palm Springs, the pool every day, he will learn how to swim. And so we get there, and for the first couple days, the kids are swimming and they're loving it. They're doing cannonballs off the side and splashing all the guests that are nearby. They're just having the time of their life. And then one day, Indigo comes up to the room and he's just crying. He's so sad, and we're like, "What's up, buddy? What's wrong?" And he can't find his floaty. And he's like, "I'm scared because I want to swim, but Dad, I don't have my floaty." And he's just crying. We're like, "It's okay, buddy. This trip is to teach you and your brother how to swim, and so we're gonna make this the trip of our life." So we go down to the pool and we just start helping Indy little by little, just begin to swim and go further and further from the steps. And all of a sudden he starts swimming 1 yard, and then 1 yard turns into 3 yards, and now he's underwater and he's coming back up and he's learning how to swim. And as he's doing this, like, all the other kids that are nearby, they're watching him, they have floaties on. They're like, "We want to swim without floaties." And it's as if his like courage and his tenacity begins to rub off on them, and all the kids start taking off their floaties. And I see Zai over there, and Zai is finding these new markers of where he could swim to, and he's taking all the lessons and he's applying it to his life. And all of a sudden we're looking over, and our buddy, our 5-year-old Zai is swimming for the first time, and it's incredible. And then as the days kind of go by, the last day we're there, Indigo comes and he says, "Daddy, I want to put my floaty on." And I said, "Buddy, you don't have one." He's like, "Well, can I borrow Zai's, or can I borrow the other kids?" And I said, "Buddy, why would you want to put the floaty back on? You've learned how to swim." And he said, "I know, but I'm scared." I said, "There's nothing to be scared of. You've conquered this, and why would you want to go back to the floaties that you've already learned how to swim?" And no matter what I said, he was determined to put that floaty back on. And for that whole last day, while everybody else is swimming freely and swimming without their floaties, Indigo is over on the side, and he's got his life vest on, and you could tell, even though he felt comfortable, you can tell he wanted to be with everyone else. You see, when I think about where we've been at in this time of a pandemic, and in this time where everything seems like it's been turned on its head, and we're asking, what is the future gonna look like? I think so many of us have decided to live out our faith like Indigo, and that God has actually reignited things in us, and he's called us to an even greater future. But rather than realize that we are free to enter into a new space, a new time, a new season of our life, I think so many of us have chosen to put the life jacket on, and we're trying to see where God is in our past rather than where he is in our future. And I want to dive into this passage in John chapter 21 where we see a moment in the life of the disciples that parallels what we're talking about here, and that they had spent 3 years with Jesus. They had walked with him, they had talked with him, they had begun a new journey of faith with Jesus, and then we're going to enter into the moment when their life was turned upside down, and they had to figure out what level of faith they were going to live out from this moment forward. In John chapter 21, starting in verse 1, it says this: "Afterward, Jesus appeared again to his disciples by the Sea of Galilee. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and the 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them. And they said, we'll go with you. So they went out, got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. And early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize that it was Jesus. So what you may notice in this moment is it seems like it's a familiar moment if you know about the life of Jesus and how he interacted with his disciples. See, 3 years prior to this, so many of them that are in this boat that are fishing right now, this is the very same environment where they met Jesus for the first time. It says they were fishing and Jesus comes alongside and he says, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of men. And it says immediately they dropped their nets and they followed him. And then for 3 years they go on this journey and it's as if life begun to be formed inside of them and they realized that what they were living wasn't life and Jesus was calling them into a greater future. But now in this moment, Jesus had been crucified, he had been killed, and they were trying to figure out, what do we do now? I imagine their whole livelihood had come into conflict and they didn't know what their next step were. And instead of stepping to the unknown, instead of stepping in the midst of that uncertainty, what they did is they chose to go back to what they knew. And what they knew was fishing. And when they enter into that boat, it was as if they were transporting back into their past rather than stepping into the future that God was calling them into. They let fear and uncertainty and worry fuel their actions rather than let the God of the universe, who they spent so much time with, be the voice that was calling them into a greater future. See, they were living with a faith that was from the past. They had yet to discover a faith that they needed for the future. And I think this is so real with so many of us right now. As I've been having conversations with myself and having conversations with friends, going, what are we going to become on the other side of this pandemic? See, what is going to be created in us that when we exit from this, when we get out of this, that we are better than when we entered into it? And we cannot simply rely on what God did before in our lives. We have to be committed to look for God in our future, to be ready, to be willing to step into the uncertainty and the unknown, that our future is not simply in the boat, it's actually in the uncharted waters. And in this verse, we see that the disciples are in this angst in their lives. They're in this moment of turmoil. They don't know what to do next. And I know so many of us are in this same place. And if we're going to have a conversation about what it looks like to have a faith for the future, see, the first thing that we have to understand is that you cannot simply rely on your past. That our past and our history is something that we can look towards for inspiration. But our past should never be simply the moments where we look where God showed up the most. It should be the momentum that we are passionately expecting God to show up in a new way. And when the disciples go back into the boat, it was as if it was the moment they decided we have to take control back into our own hands. Because that's really what uncertainty does, isn't it? Is that uncertainty really pushes us to the place where we have to decide, am I gonna trust that God is with me and trust that God is moving forward? Or am I gonna simply trust in my own strength and my own resiliency and decide that I'm gonna take control back into my own life? That you simply cannot rely on the past. And I think this is a real thing for so many of us, is that what do you do when God has shown up in a powerful way in your past? What do you do when you have those memories of when you prayed and he answered? When you were going through a rough time and he showed up? When you didn't have the strength to keep going and he brought somebody? See, how do you not settle in that moment where you're only seeing God in your rearview mirror and you don't realize that God is waiting for you in the moments that you've yet to step into? And I think this is what was happening in the life of the disciples, is that God was calling them into these uncharted waters, into these places where they had no idea how they were going to step into it. They had no idea what was being asked of them. It was completely unknown and it terrified them. And I think that is where so many of us are in right now. See, I think this is a season in history that may be one of the most uncertain times that we've ever stepped into. And what it is going to create in us is either a spirit of fear or a spirit of faith. The question is, which will we choose? See, we cannot rely on the past. We cannot simply look for God in our past. And even when I think about that, I'm reminded of this moment in Joshua, where it says that the Israelites, as they left Egypt, and they're headed to the promised land, this land flowing with milk and honey that God had said is yours. And it's Joshua, he's about to lead them into the promised land, and they come across the Jordan River. And it's as if generationally they knew what they were supposed to do next. See, they had heard about the moment when Moses, for their grandparents and their ancestor, had actually parted the Red Sea. So they had a cultural memory of, okay, this is when God shows up. And I imagine they thought God will part the sea, but in this moment it was different. And what God said is, no, what I need you to do this time is you take the first step. And the moment your feet hit the edge of the Jordan River, then the waters were part. See, God was calling them to a new faith. He was calling them to a new adventure. See, God is always pushing us forward. And the only time we're supposed to look back is as if it's a slingshot. And the moments he showed up, and the moments he was active, and the moments he was present, it's we pull it back and we remember, and then we just let God catalyze us into a future that's greater than we could even imagine. And I have to believe that that's what God is up to in this moment in history. See, I do not want my best moments with God to be in my past. How about you? I want to trust that God is doing a brand new thing, and he's just waiting for me to have the courage to step into it. I think there's just an interesting moment that always, when I read this passage, it baffles me of like, why didn't they recognize Jesus? See, the disciples are at the lake, they're fishing, they're in this moment, and it says that they had been fishing all night and they caught nothing. And then all of a sudden, Jesus comes and he has a moment. It says they did not recognize Jesus. They didn't realize it was Jesus, but they had spent 3 years with him. How could they not recognize him? Before the pandemic hit and we had gatherings in person, I remember this one time I was speaking, and then afterwards I was just meeting some people and praying for people, and there's somebody who was kind of lingering. And the team around was like, you could tell they were a little nervous. They're like, we don't know this guy. And he was lingering, and I just said, hey, ask him who he is and tell him I'd love to meet him. And so they're talking, and somebody grabs him, and they go off, and then I go meet other people, and about 10 minutes later, I see him in another area where I'm at, and he's lingering again. And I'm starting to get a little nervous. I'm like, he seems harmless, but I don't know who you are. And then we move, and he's like following as we move. And finally I just say, hey, come here, bro, I'd love to meet you. And he comes over, and I said, tell me your name. He says, my name is Isaiah. And the moment he said my name is Isaiah, it was as if finally I realized, oh my goodness, I knew you when you were 14. See, when Beck and I were youth pastors at Mosaic, we had the honor or privilege of working with young people, and Isaiah was one of our students, and I hadn't seen him in about 10 years. And he looked in, and I didn't recognize him. He had facial hair. I said, what's that foreign thing on your face? You're a kid, and now you're a man. And he had filled in a little bit, and he was a little buffer than me. And I said, well, you don't got to be that buff, bro. Put the muscles away. And I just got to have a conversation with my friend Isaiah and to hear all that he's doing and what God is shifting in his life. And he's coming back to Mosaic because he feels that God's doing a new thing in his life, and he wants to experience everything to its fullest. And it was just so beautiful to just see my friend in a whole different light. See, how could the disciples not recognize Jesus? They had spent 3 years with him. That's because I think a lot of times we're looking for the Jesus that showed up in our life in the past, and we don't see the Jesus that's waiting for us in our future. So you got to realize that God's not going to be the same and do the same and show up the same way that he did before, because he's not simply about the routines and the rituals and the traditions. No, God is about the moment that will lead to the next moment. And how is it that so many of us miss out on what God's doing? I think because we're looking for him in all the wrong places. And we don't realize that he's waiting for us to step into the future that is going to require a new level of faith. See, I think a lot of times the reason that we don't see Jesus, a lot of times the reason God doesn't show up in the way that we want him to, is because it's really hard to find God in the places where we know we're not supposed to be. And here's what I mean by that. See, I know there's some of you right now that you're in a relationship that you know that God is not in, and you're wondering, God, why aren't you here? Why can't I hear you? Why can't I feel you? God, why haven't you shown up? And God's like, because you know you're not supposed to be in it. See, I know there's so many of you right now that you're in a season of life that you're filled with unhappiness, and you're thinking that God is simply in this moment, but you don't realize that he's calling you to a greater future that's waiting for you. He's calling you to something that's beyond you, that maybe it's time for you to realize that God is not simply the God who has moved in the past, but he is the God who's waiting to move in a profound way in your life in the future. You cannot simply rely on your past if you're gonna step into this faith for the future. And if we continue in John, in this passage, and in verse 5, here's what Jesus says. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." And when they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. See, they had been fishing all night. They had tried everything. And it says that this is the moment when Jesus comes in the morning and he says, "Friends, have you any fish?" It seems as if he's taunting them, like knowing that they haven't caught anything. And these are expert fishermen. See, before they met Jesus, this was their livelihood. This is the context of where God met them. And they went back to what they knew because they were choosing comfort and security and safety. But they were expert fishermen. And then all of a sudden, Jesus comes as if he's taunting them and says, "Throw your net on the right side, and maybe you'll find some." Isn't it so annoying when God tries to act like he knows more about our life than we do? Isn't it annoying when God asks us to do the very thing that we've already done, but it's different when he's involved? See, I think a lot of times we make decisions in our life and we move forward in our life and we act as if God is there and he's present, but really we've chosen to move without him. And it's once we invite him into our story, it's once we invite him into the moment, then everything about the situation and the circumstances and the environment shifts. Because when you invite God into it, things begin to move differently. So Jesus is standing on the shore and he tells them, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." So when we're talking about a faith for the future, we have to decide that you cannot simply rely on the past, but then you also have to decide that you need to trust in what you cannot see. See, when Jesus asks them, when Jesus tells them to cast the net on the right side and then you will find some, there's a moment where they had to go, "We've already done that before. What's the point of this, Jesus? What's the point of this guy standing on the side of the lake? Like, don't you realize we've been fishing all night? We've already done that. Why would you ask me to do that again?" See, so I think so many times we find ourselves in life, I know I've been there, where I've been like, "I've done it already, God. I've tried already, God. I've tried to ask for forgiveness. I've tried to be kind and compassionate, but it hasn't worked out for me," and we stop. And I think God is saying, if you will invite me into this moment of your life, the environment will shift, the environment will change. And I'm asking you to do it one more time, because one more time with God can change everything. And I think so many of us in this moment, we've chosen to let despair take a hold of our life. We've chosen to let worry be the conversation both inside and outside. And we don't realize that hope is simply one choice away. See, freedom is one choice away. Forgiveness is one choice away. Hope is one choice away. See, there's so much that God is calling us to that we could step into that's just one choice away. But you have to trust in what you cannot see, and just because you can't see it doesn't mean that God's not moving. See, recently we went to the beach and we just wanted to get away, and we met, and in Cali, at least you were able to surf. That's one of the things you're allowed to do, and you can't go to the beach and congregate, but you can surf. And so it was a group of friends that were going surfing, and I've been terrified to go surfing for years. There's this thing called sharks. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but I'm a little intimidated by them. It's not a fair fight. And so we said, all right, it's time. I need to do this. And so some friends went out, and as we're about to go out, this woman comes out of the water. She says, "Be careful, there's a stingray." And she points, and as she points, lo and behold, we see the stingray start floating by. I said, "Nope, I'm out." See, if there's a stingray there, I know there's a shark there, and I'm not messing with stingrays, and I'm definitely not messing with sharks. And I'm just, no way. So I go back to the shore, and I'm like, I'm not going. And so the friends go out and swim and surf, and they're having the time of their life. And then finally, friend Matt Pagan shows up. And he's about 30 minutes late, but it's all good. And Matt comes, and he's got a board, and I can't explain it, but just there was a level of confidence that I stepped into the moment I saw Matt. It didn't happen the same way when I saw my other friends who aren't professional surfers, but Matt Pagan is a professional surfer, and I felt like, if Matt's here, I can do this. So we grab the board, and we go out, and it is not going well. This brother is struggling on this board. And Matt's trying to coach me, and he's trying to tell me this is the moment where you need to paddle, and this is the moment you need to watch the wave. You're looking for this crest, and using all these terms that I never heard of, but I'm trusting him. But I'm just falling, and I'm falling, and I'm falling. I'm doing all the things he's telling me to do, but it's not working. And he's like, you just have to trust in my voice. You have to trust when I tell you to go. And I say, I am, Matt. I'm doing it every single time, and nothing's happening. I don't know how good of a coach you are, bro. And he said, just trust me. We're gonna catch this, because I'm gonna get you in exactly the right place, and then you're just gonna do what you do, and you're gonna ride this wave. And I can't explain, but this one wave I could just feel it. I could feel that this was the one, and Matt had that look in his eye. He's like, ready? All right, here we go. And all of a sudden I start going, and he says, now. And when he says now, I just hopped up, and I did everything that I'd done every moment before. I bent my knees, I was on my back foot, and I was ready to fall. And then all of a sudden I'm standing, and I'm on this wave, and I'm getting closer to shore. And I'm like, I'm surfing? Is this happening right now? I was just had the biggest smile on my face, and I rode that wave for what felt like 7 minutes. It was probably 3 seconds. And it was just so exhilarating, and I got out of the water, and me and Matt just made eye contact. I was like, we did it. I know he did it, but I was like, we did it. And it was this moment where I realized that just because I had done it before, just because I had tried before, doesn't mean that this next time wasn't going to be the one wave that I would finally be able to catch, when all the hard work, all the determination, all the resiliency would finally lead to the place where we would ride that wave, and it would be so exhilarating. See, I think a lot of times this is us, that we've tried that wave, and we've done all the things that somebody told us to do, and we did it, and we did it, and we did it, and it didn't work out, and we just give up, rather than realize that if we're gonna have a faith for the future, it's gonna require a level of resiliency that we've never had before. See, there are dark days, not just behind us, not just in our present, but they're ahead of us. And we must decide now that we are gonna invite God into that story, so that we do not step into that future alone, and realize that He is with us. And when He is with us, there is no land that we cannot take with Him on our side. There is no journey that we cannot step into. There is no future that is not filled with promise and beauty and wonder. And I know for so many of you right now, if you're like me, you've had moments in your life when you've wondered, God, where are you? You've had moments in your life, you've had moments during the season when you said, God, are you even listening? If you're like me, you've had times with God where you just cried out and said, God, I don't know if I can take this anymore. I just feel so overwhelming, and it feels so hard, and it feels so heavy. But it's in these moments when we could just trust in what we cannot see. We can trust in the goodness of God, where we can look back at all the moments when he showed up in our lives and in the lives of our friends, and in the moments in the scriptures that are the fuel that help us in the moment to realize that God is waiting for us in our future. And that future is far more beautiful than our past. So when these disciples are standing in this boat, and when Jesus says, cast your net on the right side and you will find some, I imagine all of the doubts went through their brain, and they wondered, what is the point? But I'm so thankful that Jesus is the one who always promises that he'll be there in our darkest moments, even when we don't see the point, even when we don't find the meaning. When he steps into our story, it's as if he brings the meaning that we've been desperately longing for. And the disciples cast the net on the right side, and it says that they bring up so many fish that they can't even haul the net in. And then in verse 7, we pick up their story, and I love how they have a moment with Jesus that would begin to inform their future. Verse 7 says this: Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." And as soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far from shore, about 100 yards. And when they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." And so Simon Peter climbed back into the boat, and he dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153, but even with so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Then Jesus came, he took the bread, and he gave it to them. And he did the same with the fish. And this is now the third time Jesus appeared to his disciples after he was raised from the dead. See, I love this moment in the life of Jesus. See, he didn't condemn the disciples for going back into the boat, for choosing safety and comfort and security. He just stood on that shore and he called out the best version of themselves that he knew was in there. And he meets them in their moment, and they have this life-changing moment where they see a miracle happen, and they have so much fish they don't know what to do with it. And then I love that what Jesus invites them into is he's on the shore, and it says that there's a fire burning, and there's already fish there, and he says, "Come have breakfast with me." So again, this moment reminds us that everything Jesus does is relational. That everything he does is about intimacy. It's about a closeness with him, and that he's always pulling us in with his love. And he does not judge, he does not condemn when we blow it. He does not hold it over our head. He just waits for us on the shore. He waits for us in our future, and he says, "I'm here. I'm just gonna call you into a new season." And this important thing that happens that we need to understand, see it says that Jesus is on the shore and the fire is going, and he says, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught," but it also says that he was already cooking fish. And I think this is what happens a lot of times when we engage with God, is that when he asks something of us, when he asks us to give back to him, when he asks us to be generous, we think it's God taking from us, and we don't realize that, no, we're actually bringing to him what already belonged to him. that everything God does, he's always asking us to give back to him, because you know what he does? Is he gives back to us. He says, bring some of the fish you just caught. We're gonna share a meal together. But I want you to understand is he says, everything that you give me, I will always give back to you tenfold. See, when you give God a heart of stone, you know what he gives you? A heart of flesh. See, when you give God all your worries, you know what he gives you? He gives you freedom. See, when you give God all your guilt and your shame, all your burdens and your worry, you know what he gives you? He gives you a new future where you don't have to let that be the story of your life. He gives you his grace. He gives you his mercy. He gives you his kindness. He gives you his love. See, every single time when we come to God, when we bring things to him, we put it in his hands. Every single time when we give God our hearts, when we give God our souls, when we give God our futures, everything he gives back to us, it always expands. It always multiplies. See, everything God does is bigger than what we give him. And if we're gonna choose to live a life where we have a faith for the future, you simply cannot rely on the past. You need to trust in what you cannot see, but you also have to be willing to give back to God. And sometimes that's the scariest thing in the world. It's because we think that what we have in our life is simply because of our own talent and our own gifting and our own investment. And although there are things in our lives that we do step into and we do have success, what we need to realize is that every good thing that has ever come into our life has the fingerprints of God all over it. And when you give God your successes, when you give God your talent, when you give God your gifting, he will always multiply it. He will always expand it to more. And I know there's so many of you right now where the first conversation before you can ask God what your future looks like, you can meet God in those uncharted waters that you've yet to step into, where you can meet God in the midst of your uncertainty. See, the first thing that you need to do is you need to give God your heart. And there's so many of you right now that you know that you've been holding out on God. You know that he has been like the disciples and he's waiting on the shore and he's got a fire that's burning and he's just waiting for you to meet him there. And he's saying, bring to me what you got. He's saying, bring it all to me. Bring all your pain, bring all your worries, bring all your fears, bring all your insecurities. He said, bring it all to me. Bring me your successes. Bring me your joys. Bring me all the celebrations that when you meet me around this fire, you'll realize that everything that I do, everything that I am is about pouring into your life, is about reminding you that there's nothing in the world that matters to me more than you. And for some of you right now, the first and most important decision that you have to make before you can give God anything in your future, you need to give him your life in the present. So if that's you right now and you know it's your moment, I want to pray for you and I want to give you an opportunity to let the God of the universe, to let the person of Jesus who came and sacrificed everything on your behalf, who allowed himself to be crucified, who allowed himself to be killed because he wanted you to know that everything that he does is for your freedom. It's for your future. It's for your life. And I think so many of you right now that this is your moment. This is your choice. This is your act that God is waiting for you to step into, and it will be the act that will forever change your future. If that's you right now, and you need to make this decision, then here's what I want you to do. I want you to look at me, and I want you to hear the voice of God calling you to a greater future. And I just want you to pray this prayer. Say, Jesus, I give you my life. That's it. Jesus, I give you my life. And it's when you give him your life, it's this exchange where we talked about where you're going to give back to God, but the life that he gives you back is going to be far greater than the one that you gave him first. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my life. I know there's so many of you right now that made that decision, and we are so excited for that. I'm going to pray for you in a second, but I also know there's some of you right now that you've made that decision before and you've trusted Jesus, but life has hit you hard. And I want to give you an opportunity as well, if that's you, where you know that you're like Indy, where there was a moment where you took the life jacket off and you trusted Jesus with everything. There's a moment when you were swimming and you were free and you were living the life that was bigger than you could have imagined, but there came a time in your life when you put the life jacket back on, when you chose comfort, you chose safety, you chose security, and you know that God said it's time to trust me with your future. If that's you, then I just want you, in everything that you have right now, I just want you to tell God that you're no longer gonna live a faith in your past, but you're gonna meet God with a new faith in your future. And it's time for you to live free. Father, I pray for every single person right now that made a decision to follow you, to trust you with their life. Yeah, I pray that you would just wrap them in your love right now, Jesus. I pray that you would help them know that their future is greater than their past, that they would be filled with your passion and your urgency to light the world on fire with hope and with meaning. And I pray, God, that what you would do in them during this time would prepare them for what they step into in their future. And Jesus, I pray for every single person as well that has decided safety and security is no longer in their future, and that they would live free, that they would trust you with uncertainty, and they would step into this season that we have no idea what's ahead of us, but we know that you are waiting for us. And so we pray that we would have the courage, we would have the faith, and we would have the urgency to not simply look for you in our past, but we would meet you in our future. We thank you so much, Jesus. We love you, and we ask all this in your name. Amen.